It's time to get our hands on some hacking tools. Before we begin though, our lawyers have advised that we share this disclaimer with you, so please take a moment and make sure that you read it. Now that you read the disclaimer, let's begin. Let's revisit one of the earlier slides. We said that to be able to hack remotely, you would need to have 4 different things. 1. The IP address of your target. 2. An exposed remote service running on the IP address. 3. Vulnerabilities in services. And 4. An exploit. We've talked in length about IP addresses, the Internet Protocol, and other protocols. And the reason we went into such details is because now it's the time that we explain how you can discover remote services running on your target. And we do this using a technique called port scanning. So what is port scanning? Remember when we said that different services have different ports? So for example, the web service would have port 80 open. The mail service would have port 25 open. And so on. So an open port is an indication that there is a service running behind it. Port scanning is a technique of identifying open ports and identifying the service running behind that port. And it happens by connecting to each port and analyzing the response that we get from this connection. Meet Nmap, or Network Mapper, your first hacking tool. Nmap started as a port scanner, and then it developed into much more than just that. Now it does things like operating system identification, service identification, and a whole bunch of other things that we cover in more advanced courses. By default, when we're doing an Nmap scan, Nmap does a SYN scan. We'll talk about what that is in a second. The response to the SYN scan will determine the state of the port. If you get a SYN-ACK response, that means the port is open. If you get a reset response, that means the port is closed. And if you get no response, that means the port is filtered. What does all that mean? Remember when we talked about the TCP handshake? We weren't talking about this just for the heck of it. There's a reason why we were explaining all that. A SYN scan happens as such. The port scanner, your Nmap tool or any port scanner, if you're doing a SYN scan, will start by sending a SYN packet to the target. So let's say, for example, you try to identify whether port 80 is open. What Nmap does is that it sends a SYN packet, so it starts the TCP 3-way handshake. What do we expect in response to the SYN packet? If you remember, the normal response is a SYN-ACK packet. And this is where the port scan stops. Let's compare that to the 3-way handshake. The 3-way handshake sends the SYN packet, expects a SYN-ACK packet, and then responds by an ACK packet. So when we did the packet analysis in a previous exercise, when we were initiating the conversation with Google, we saw through Wireshark that the first packet that we sent was a SYN packet. Google responded with a SYN-ACK packet, and then we responded back with an ACK packet. That was our 3-way handshake, trying to communicate with port 80. A SYN scan, however, wouldn't complete the 3-way handshake. All it does is that it sends a SYN packet to the port you're trying to scan, and it waits for the response. If the response is a SYN-ACK, that is an indication that the port is open and is ready to communicate. And this is where it terminates the scan. It stops, because now it has all the information that it needs. If the answer, on the other hand, is a reset packet, that means the port is closed, and we cannot communicate to the port. If we get no response, that means chances are that the port is filtered. What do we mean by filtered? That means there's some kind of a network security device, such as a firewall, for example, controlling access to this port. It might have detected that you're doing a port scan and it dropped your packet. It wouldn't allow you to communicate with this port. And as such, we assume that the port is filtered. Installing Nmap is pretty straightforward. You go to the Nmap download page, download the executable file, and just follow the instructions. Using Nmap is pretty straightforward. All you have to do to perform a default scan is write nmap space the target. For this exercise, we're going to be scanning hackthisite.org. This is a hacking practice website that gives permission to everybody to try and hack it. And as you can see, Nmap has started. To see what the progress is, you can hit the enter or the return key. Every time you hit the enter key, you'll get an update of how long the scan has been going on and how long is remaining. At the moment, we have about 10 seconds remaining. And here we go, the scan has finished. If you look at the results, it shows that there are 3 ports open: SSH at port 22, HTTP port 80, and HTTPS port 443. Here's your mission for this section. I'd like you to explore the other options for Nmap scans. We mentioned that the default type of scanning is a SYN scan. There are other types of scanning. Try and find out what these are and how do they work. Following that, I'd like you to perform an Nmap scan against the target machine in our lab. See how many ports you identify as open, and try to figure out what are these services running behind these ports. Do a little bit of research and see if you can determine what these services are and what are they used for.